Australia, a land of stunning beaches, vibrant cities, and endless opportunities. It's a place that many dream of calling home. But behind this postcard perfect image lies a harsh truth. For many Australians, that dream feels increasingly out of reach. Today, we'll uncover the reasons behind Australia's unprecedented housing crisis, skyrocketing costs of living, and a declining economy that's leaving hardworking Australians behind. How did it get this bad? And more importantly, is there a way out? Make sure to stick around because later we will reveal the policies that have fueled this crisis and what can actually be done to fix it. Let's start with what most Australians are feeling right now: the housing and rental crisis. It's an issue that doesn't just affect the economy, it impacts everyday lives, from young professionals dreaming of their first home to families struggling to keep a roof over their heads. For decades, home ownership has been a cornerstone of the Australian dream, but today it's slipping further out of reach. The median price for a home in Sydney, for example, now exceeds $1.5 million. To put this into perspective, the average household income has nowhere near kept pace with this rise. As property values soar, even dual income families find themselves unable to meet the deposit requirements, let alone service the enormous mortgages needed to buy a home. Young Australians are among the hardest hit. The rate of home ownership for people under 34 has dropped by 25% over the past few decades. Many have resigned themselves to the idea that they may never own a home. It's no longer a question of ambition or hard work. The financial gap between wages and housing costs has become insurmountable for an entire generation. The situation isn't any better for renters. Sydney's rental market, for instance, has reached a point where median rents exceed $3,000 per month. For many, this isn't just an inconvenience, it's a crisis. The competition for rental properties has grown so fierce that it's common to see queues of people stretching around the block for inspections. And even then, landlords can check-pick tenants who are willing to pay above the asking price, leaving others in the lurch. Then there are the shocking examples that highlight just how absurd the housing market has become. In Sydney, properties with significant flaws, like homes without a functioning kitchen or even a toilet, are being sold for millions of dollars. One property, a small fixer-up with no livable features, recently sold for an eye-watering $3.5 million. It's no wonder many Australians feel like the market has completely lost touch with reality. This housing and rental crisis isn't just an economic issue, it's a social one. It's reshaping Australian society in ways we have never seen before. Families are being pushed further away from their jobs and communities, spending hours commuting because affordable housing is only available on the outskirts of cities. The dream of owning a home or even securing a stable rental has become a source of anxiety for millions. But why is this happening? To understand the root cause, we need to examine one of the most debated factors: immigration. It's a topic that stirs strong opinions, but the numbers don't lie. It's a key piece of the housing crisis puzzle. In the past year alone, Australia welcomed a record-breaking 740,000 immigrants. This is one of the highest annual intakes in the nation's history. While immigration brings economic benefits like filling labor shortages and increasing diversity, it also puts immense pressure on the housing market. With more people coming in than homes being built, the demand for housing has outpaced supply, especially in major cities like Sydney and Melbourne. Immigrants are particularly reliant on the rental market. Around 70% of new arrivals are renters, and they often gravitate toward urban areas where jobs, education, and services are concentrated. This influx has driven up competition in the rental market, pushing prices higher in key suburbs. For long-term residents, this means bidding wars, higher rents, and even the possibility of being priced out of their communities. However, immigration isn't the sole cause of rising home prices. Historically, migration levels have not had a dramatic impact on the overall cost of buying a home. Studies show that while immigration adds to demand, the primary driver of soaring home prices is the lack of new housing supply. Simply put, we are bringing in more people without building enough homes to accommodate them, creating a bottleneck that exacerbates the problem. This isn't just a problem for immigrants or renters, it's a nationwide issue. Increased rental demand often pushes landlords to sell their properties for a profit or turn them into short term rentals like Airbnbs. This further limits the availability of long term rental properties, creating a vicious cycle of scarcity and rising costs. As more Australians struggle to find affordable housing, resentment toward immigration policies grows, a sentiment that oversimplifies a much deeper issue. Blaming immigration alone for the housing crisis ignores the larger structural problems in Australia's housing market. While it's true that immigration contributes to higher demand, it also highlights the government's failure to plan for population growth effectively. Building more homes to meet demand should be a priority, but as we'll see next, the construction industry faces its own set of challenges. So, if immigration isn't the only culprit, why isn't Australia building enough homes? Australia is currently experiencing a decline in housing starts, with fewer homes being built today than at any point in the past decade. The construction industry is grappling with rising costs, labor shortages, and supply chain disruptions, all of which slow down the pace of development. Meanwhile, as the population grows, the demand for housing increases exponentially, creating a ever-widening gap between what's needed and what's available. One of the reasons for this shortfall is how Australian cities are designed. Unlike global counterparts like London or Munich, Australian cities are far less dense. Urban sprawl has been the default approach to housing development, with new suburbs stretching further and further from city centers. This creates challenges in providing infrastructure, public transport, and amenities, making these areas less attractive for potential homeowners and renters. Compounding this problem is what's known as the NIMBY effect, not in my backyard. This refers to opposition from local communities and councils to new developments in established neighborhoods. While everyone agrees more housing is needed, few are willing to accept changes to their own communities, such as high density apartment buildings or affordable housing projects. This resistance, combined with bureaucratic red tape, leads to long approval times for new developments and discourages potential builders. Another major issue is artificial land scarcity. A significant portion of land around Australia's major cities is restricted for development due to zoning laws, environmental protections, or government owned properties. While these restrictions can serve important purposes, they also limit the supply of buildable land, driving up land prices and, by extension, housing costs. Developers unable to access affordable land often opt for higher end projects that maximize profits, leaving the market with fewer affordable options. Ultimately, the lack of new homes is a systemic issue. It's not just about construction delays or zoning laws, it's about a broader failure to plan for Australia's future. Without significant reforms, this shortage will continue to fuel the housing crisis, keeping prices high and leaving countless Australians without a place to call home. But even beyond the issue of supply, there is another hidden factor making things worse: tax policies. How do tax incentives contribute to the housing crisis? Let's take a closer look. The housing crisis isn't just about supply and demand, it's also about who benefits from the system. Australia's tax policies have created a market where investors often hold the upper hand, leaving everyday Australians struggling to compete. One of the most controversial policies is negative gearing. This tax rule allows investors to claim losses on rental properties like maintenance costs or the gap between rental income and loan repayments as deductions on their taxable income. While this can make property investment more appealing, it also encourages speculative buying, driving up property prices. Everyday Australians looking for a family home often find themselves priced out by investors chasing tax benefits. Another issue lies within superannuation rules. Australia's retirement savings system allows individuals to invest their super funds in real estate. For many, this has become a preferred strategy as it often offers higher returns than traditional investments like stocks or bonds. But as more people pour their savings into property, demand grows, pushing prices even higher. This creates a market where housing is treated more like a wealth building tool than a basic human need. Capital gains tax incentives also play a significant role. When property owners sell their homes or investments, they benefit from generous tax breaks on their profits. This disproportionately favors older Australians who are more likely to own property and take advantage of these tax benefits. Meanwhile, younger Australians, already struggling with stagnant wages and rising costs, are left out of the equation, widening the generational wealth gap. These policies, while originally designed to stimulate the economy, have had unintended consequences. They prioritize property as an investment vehicle over housing as a fundamental need. As a result, the market has become skewed, favoring those who can afford to buy multiple properties while leaving first time buyers and renters to grapple with rising costs. To truly address the housing crisis, Australia must rethink these tax incentives and consider reforms that make the system fairer for everyone. But the consequences of this crisis extend far beyond housing. It's reshaping the economy and leaving many Australians behind. One major consequence is declining productivity. Australia has become heavily reliant on its real estate sector, pouring billions of dollars into buying, selling, and maintaining properties. While this creates short term economic activity, it doesn't foster long term growth. Other critical sectors like innovation, research, and manufacturing are being neglected. Countries with diversified investments such as South Korea or Germany see greater productivity gains, while Australia falls behind in global competitiveness. This housing obsession has also left Australians burdened with high levels of debt. In 2023, the ratio of household debt to disposable income reached a staggering 190%. For many, a large portion of their income goes toward mortgage repayments or rent, leaving little room for savings or spending on other goods and services. This suppresses consumer spending, which is vital for a healthy, balanced economy. Adding to this strain is Australia's high tax burden. The country has some of the highest income and corporate tax rates in the developed world. While these taxes fund essential public services, they also discourage entrepreneurship and business growth. Many Australians feel trapped with high taxes eating into their wages while housing costs continue to rise. This creates a cycle where businesses struggle to expand and wages remain stagnant. Speaking of wages, it's worth noting that real wage growth in Australia has been stagnant for over a decade. Despite rising housing costs, wages have failed to keep pace with inflation. This widening gap means that even those with stable jobs are finding it harder to maintain their standard of living. For younger Australians, the prospect of building wealth or achieving financial security feels increasingly out of reach. These economic challenges have long-term implications. A generation of Australians is being priced out of the housing market, leaving them dependent on rentals well into their later years. This not only affects their financial security but also increases pressure on social welfare systems as they age. Meanwhile, businesses face a shrinking consumer base as people spend less on goods and services to prioritize housing costs. At its core, the housing crisis isn't just a housing issue, it's a national economic crisis. It affects productivity, innovation, wages, and even the country's ability to compete on the global stage. To address this, Australia must rethink its economic priorities, balancing the needs of the housing market with investments in other areas. But is there a way out of this crisis? The solution won't be simple, but it's possible. Let's explore what can actually be done to fix this. So, what's the way out of this crisis? It's going to take more than quick fixes. It will require bold, long term reforms and a collective effort to reshape Australia's housing and economic landscape. One of the first steps is policy changes that incentivize business investment and reduce the tax burden on Australians. Lowering income taxes would free up more money for families to spend on housing or other essential needs while also encouraging entrepreneurship. Additionally, abolishing negative gearing would shift the focus from speculative property investment to sustainable housing development. Australia also needs a comprehensive development reform. The government must cut through the red tape and streamline the approval process for new homes, especially in high demand areas. This could include easing zoning laws and incentivizing high density housing projects in city centers. Urban densification would help alleviate pressure on outer suburbs where housing is often more expensive due to limited infrastructure. At the same time, public awareness and engagement are essential. Australians must be educated about how policies and market forces contribute to the crisis, and politicians need to be held accountable for making the changes necessary to solve it. Empowering voters to push for change will create pressure on lawmakers to act in the best interest of the majority, not just wealthy property owners. This is more than just a housing crisis. It's about the future of Australia, the future of young families trying to build their lives, the aspirations of young professionals hoping to own a home, and the promise of a fair society where hard work and opportunity are rewarded. Australia's housing crisis didn't happen overnight. It's the result of decades of policy decisions, economic missteps, and structural failures. Rising home prices, skyrocketing rents, and the inability to build enough homes have left millions of Australians in a precarious position. The impact is felt across the economy, from declining productivity to stagnant wages, and it's not something that can be solved with short term fixes. But it's not too late. We have the power to demand change and start working towards solutions that prioritize the needs of everyday Australians. What do you think is the biggest factor driving the housing crisis? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives into economics and society. If you want to know why living in Canada is also impossible, then you should watch this video. Thanks for watching, mate. Bye.